just postulating. And it doesn't speak for those, I would say, who were born in the 80s or below. Early 90s were on the cusp, but everybody after. And I get it, some people are gonna get all their panties in a wad, but I believe some of the problems we're having today are a result of our society shifting its parenting style from teaching to protecting. So I grew up in a generation where there wasn't any, well, look, we played video games, trust me, parents, get away from the TV, get outside, like they had the same type of problems, but the difference is they said go out and leave. So when you got out, I can tell you the fights I got in that my parents never go to, I got in. I can tell you about all the times we had to negotiate on where we were gonna build the fort. I can tell you how we negotiated where we were gonna get the stuff for the fort, who's gonna get what. Like there was a lot of interaction and stuff that parents were not part of, that kids had to figure out on their own.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Becc Holland and Keenan. Becc is CEO and founder at Flip the Script. Keenan is Keenan, as well as CEO of a sales guy consulting, and author of the best-selling book, Gap Selling. Now, in our conversation today, Becc, Keenan, and I start out by talking about how Becc and Keenan are taking their show on the road, like rock stars, on their 9-city North American tour that kicks off next month. And we dig into the details of the tour and the types of things that attendees can expect to learn. And then we veer off into unexplored territory like we always do when Keenan is on this show. And I don't want to spoil it, but needless to say, it is entertaining and educational. So you want to stick around and hear this. Now, before we get to Becc and Keenan, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it. If you could also leave us a review, let us know how we're doing. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Becc, Keenan, welcome to the show.
Hello, Andy Paul.
Excited to be here.
So actually, somebody had asked me, I was talking about Keenan earlier, somebody I was talking to earlier today, and I said, I think I've known Keenan so long that when I met him, he was just Jim.
That's interesting. I think we should just go with Jim for the rest of the conversation.
No, I forgot. I slipped once when Keenan and I were doing a podcast interview a couple of years ago, and he let me know I was going down the wrong path.
I just had a long conversation actually today with Jill Conrath, and we were talking about the same thing. Like she was one of the very first people that put their arms around me when I was a young 42-year-old newbie into the space, and we were talking about all of that. Yeah, it's funny. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Well, she likewise did the same for me. I mean, I was a little older than 42, but nonetheless, very generous support from Jill.
She's good piece.
So I sort of feel like, I'm in the presence of rock stars here. And just like rock stars, you guys are going out on tour. So I love that. So Becc, tell me about the tour.
Well, it's TBD. Hasn't happened yet.
Well, I know, but you're here to tell me about it and tell the audience about what's going to happen.
Yeah, so we're doing 9 different cities, and it's going to be all free. We're essentially going to do some training after hours, kind of a rogue series. And I'm going to be diving deep on the prospecting angle. Keenan's going to be going in on the closing, quote unquote, closing angle. But essentially, I got this random idea in my head of like, okay, I used to work in music venues and I bartended and, ran shows back in my Renegade days. And I'm like, okay, we already have the tour bus. We already have the tour manager from the Goo Goo Dolls.
Well, wait. We're going to get to the tour bus. Let's not jump ahead. So let's talk about the event itself. So in each city, there's going to be you and Keenan talking, and then there's going to be you're going to have breakouts afterwards for more intimate training, or what?
Yeah. So essentially, we're going to lead off. We're going to have an opener in every city, and it kind of flexes depending on the city, and then we're going to go into a pitch off, where there will be 2 reps that are going to give their best 7-minute pitch and be judged by the crowd. And
how are they being picked?
They are being hand selected by me beforehand.
Okay.
And essentially they're opening themselves up to coaching. And then the crowd is going to elect the winner.
Very cool. So how many people at these venues you're going? Are these music venues you're going to, or like what's the size of the crowd that people will be doing their pitch off in front of?
Yeah, so it depends on the venue, but the smallest venue is actually probably my favorite venue is going to be the Troubadour in LA. So that's where...
The Troubadour?
Yes. Do you know the Troubadour?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, gosh, if you're a follower of Jackson Brown and Eagles and Elton John and James Taylor, Carole King, all those people played the Troubadour.
Yes. Elton John, even in the movie Rocket Man, that's the venue that they feature as his first venue in LA. So they're known for kind of like the breakout Coldplay, the Killers, Jimi Hendrix, have all played there. So we're doing it at the Troubadour in LA. So that capacity is oddly enough only like 120 seats.
So how did you decide the Troubadour? I find this fascinating. That's why I was calling you guys rock stars. So you're going to these music venues, these historic music venues, and we'll get to the tour bus because that's the other part of it. But how'd you decide on that?
The music venues or the Troubadour in specific?
Well, both.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting mix because in my career, I originally started selling as an AE, and then I decided to throw in the towel and go into music full time because I'm like, I want to live my life and like spread my wings, whatever. So I like went into music.
Music meaning what?
Meaning I booked tours, local tours, national tours, bartended a bunch of venues. And because I have an inherent love for music, I'm very music oriented.
All right, so let's dig deep. So what type of music? What groups? Who do you follow?
Oh, I mean, my top five. Keenan's probably gonna get sick to his stomach whenever he hears these, but Taylor Swift is definitely in my top five.
He's got 3 teenage daughters. I think he probably hears enough Taylor Swift on rotation.
They hate Taylor Swift, man.
Oh, they do?
Oh, they hate her. Oh my God! No, my teenagers listen to Meek Mill and freaking Tyler the Creator, and oh no, she's straight hip hop, man. Like,
all right.
So interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Michael Jackson for sure is top 5 for me. Elliott Smith is top 5. Bands like The Format, Fun, Honorary Title. Quinn, I love Quinn. AJR. All
right.
Yeah, that's it's kind of an eclectic mix, but I definitely love Taylor Swift for sure.
So how'd you end up back then in sales?
So I went into music thinking like, okay, this is really my true passion and this is my dream. And my parents were like, you finished college, so we're excited for you. So they were like, okay, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. And so I went into music for a couple of years, and after about I don't know, a year, I'm like, I'm not cut out for this. I'm just really, really like not. So I'd be like bartending and I would get in trouble for reading too much. They're like, less of the books, more of the smiling and like serving the drinks. So I got to work with a lot of really, really interesting acts and bands and see a lot of good shows. And then after about a year, I'm like, I'm tapped out. I can't do it anymore. So I was in the green room where the band and the venue were arguing back and forth, and they had been for, I counted, 48 minutes about there was 6 Diet Cokes that were supposed to be on their rider, meaning provided at the onset, and they weren't there. And so they're going back and forth on who is going to pay for these Diet Cokes. And I had this out-of-body experience, and I literally stood up, and I threw a 20 on the table, and I was like, I'll pay for the Diet Cokes. Russell, I quit.
No. Yeah, who didn't take the blue M&Ms out of the bowl? Yes.
Everyone was in shock, and I just walked out of the room. So I went back into sales. I'm like, I think that this isn't. But that was kind of the bend for it of like I've found this interesting thing, and I'm sure that Keenan has too in my career, where you've got your authentic self, what things that you really like, and then you kind of have your corporate self, or the one that you build up, or the image that you portray. And there's a very big delta, at least for me, of I thought that I can never be who I truly am, within my profession. I thought that I had from 8 to 5, I had to bottle it up and essentially put on the suit and do the thing and close the deal. And then at 5 o'clock, I can go home and be my actual self, where I have all these interests, music being one of them. And so this was, I think being yourself is a luxury. and a lot of stage of the game. So it's where I felt really comfortable. So I got the idea, and I pitched it to Keenan, and I was kind of shocked when he said yes originally, because it's just such a rogue thing, but he was super sweet about it and just, said he'd be a part of it.
Yeah, so Keenan, take us through that. So, I mean, you guys have very sort of complementary areas that you focus on. Becc more, sort of top of funnel, Keenan more middle and bottom of the funnel. Tell us about your interest in the tour, and what are you going to talk about when you're out there?
I don't know what I'm talking about. I told her it'd be different every show. So, I'll cross the bridge when I get there. But the reason I did it is, I don't know, I'm just not afraid to do new things. So I was like, well, she did it last year, and she said a bunch of people showed up. And I said, how can I lose if I'm on the road for 2 weeks talking to hundreds, if not thousands of people over a 2-week period? How can I lose? So all right, I'll do it. Yeah.
So what's top of mind for you these days in terms of topics that are of interest to you that you want to talk about?
That's really interesting. That is one of the reasons I didn't commit to my topics, because rightfully so, but also personally a bit frustrating, is more and more of my time is spent on the business, not in the business. We're growing quickly. We've crossed some pretty substantial milestones. We're now licensing our stuff. We're bringing on GMs. I have this particular set of goals I'm trying to reach over a 7-year period, and so I don't spend as much time in the sales data evaluation world as I would like. You know what I'm saying? So as we get closer to the event, I have a tendency to submerge myself in what people are talking about, what's frustrating them, what's going on, and from there I'll pull out my bag of tricks. But what you can know is it'll be typical Keenan. It will be my take on bullshit. It will be breaking down ideas that I think are good that are just not articulated well or put in a format or an executable style, and show and be like, this is good, but the way it's being taught or laid out or shared is not advantageous to salespeople. So here's a take that will actually allow you to apply it. So it'll be a typical Keenan fashion.
Okay. But you want to count on that. That's the entertainment value, right? Right. That's why people are coming.
Yeah.
So what are the 9 cities again?
We're going to be doing Boston, New York, Chicago, Raleigh, Atlanta, Austin, Salt Lake, LA, and SF.
All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the bus. So you said you had a tour bus, because this is a first, as far as I can tell, for the sales world, is getting on a tour bus. And you said you have a tour manager. You have roadies as well, or?
No. What do you mean by roadies? I'm sorry.
Well, people, not groupies, roadies, people that set up the equipment and so on. I can see by your expression that you were wondering where I was talking about. It's like, not that.
We definitely do have a tour manager. I think the most interesting thing that I'm excited about is not necessarily all the collateral and the music theme of it. It's more so that I feel like we're at a really dangerous time in sales from my perspective. All
right, let's explore that.
Yeah. I mean, the statistics show, or at least some of the stats that I've read, that 76% of SDRs aren't hitting quota and 85% of account executives aren't hitting 75% of their quota. And I go through these teams, and the intent is there, the desire is there, but the execution and the framework and the format and, all of the inherent skills that go along with it, it just doesn't seem to be working out. And so I was particularly drawn to Keenan's body of work, because he's talking about something. He was talking about sales in a way that I hadn't seen it talked about before, in a way that finally made sense to me. So I think that this is a bridge, or at least what I hope is a foray, and kind of taking down the curtain and saying like, okay, what we're doing right now, as is how we've done it in the industry so far, is not getting us to our goal, and so it's one thing to not admit that at all. It's another thing to admit it and not do anything about it. But how do we actually put a shot on goal to do something about it? How do we pivot the infrastructure of sales into something that's more meaningful, more focused on the actual prospect at hand, that is less technique driven, that truly they walk away from the engagement being not only satisfied with your service, but in a different spot for the better, because of working with you. And so I'm excited particularly because when I would see Keenan present, it wasn't the grandiloquence of it all. It was more so he was mentioning, something that I hadn't heard before. And he was mentioning selling in a way that felt better to me and was more, it was more advantageous to the buyer and all about the buyer and less about talking about all of your stuff in a way. So I think I've heard in the industry, and I'll say this, and then I'll shut up, but I think I've heard people say, well, yeah, you shouldn't talk about features and benefits and all that stuff. You should talk about, pain, or you should talk about, these other couple of items, or like true discovery is like just understanding from a high level, what they want, and listening to him talk. I was like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of pizzazz and there's a lot of kind of mojo in the whole thing. But I'm like, he was the first person that I heard that I had not heard the content that he was talking about in terms of how do you enter into the buyer's world and understand the buyer's world better than the buyer does, and how do you solve some of those problems that they might not even know that they had, and help put them in a different spot, than they were beforehand. So that's what I'm excited about the tour bus. I'm excited about all the filming that we're going to do there. But I hope that this is just the first effort of many, to kind of pivot the industry, and tease out what's wrong with it and how can we start to solve it.
Right. So, Keenan, so why is there such resistance to change in sales, and where does that start? Where's the change have to start from?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not convinced there's a resistance to change as much as I'm convinced that we're losing the understanding of what selling is. Mm-hmm. So, look, when we started, I think I was the last generation, probably, maybe a few people after me, where we sold without the internet, right? So my first job was book of lists. I just got lucky that I worked for the Chamber of Commerce and they created the list, so they just gave it to us, you know what I'm saying? And and in the yellow pages. And I remember my first job, I was a hustler. I was hungry. So I'd be driving home and I'd be in traffic and I'd see trucks or signs. I'm like, oh, I should call them tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? And so there was a lot of experiential learning that organizations just couldn't mitigate for us or baby us on. And so that learning, right, wrong, or indifferent, as you became managers and VPs, you built those people who cared, built processes and environments around that not only helped the whole sales organization, but targeted and focused on those things, those particular selling skills that salespeople needed. Right now, when I sit and talk to sales leaders, 90% of the conversation is around SDR, is around structure, process, and tools. Mm-hmm. It's rarely around people, right? And when you start talking about the people, they just all default to, well, we know, just go find the pain. Like, oh, we know, just like they just flick it. Like, I already know all that. So let's get all this other stuff. And what's quickly happening is they're lacking the critical thinking skills. They're lacking the creativity. They're lacking the psychological understanding of buyers and how you connect with the buyer. Mm-hmm. And they're even lacking in many ways I hate to call it the art, but the sophistication of asking a question.
Right.
Like just a simple question, how you ask it 3 different ways is going to get you 3 different answers, right? But they just bunged it all together and be like, well, ask them that. So if you ever watched have you ever watched my live selling?
No.
So, oh my God. So I did this live sales call called Gap Sell Keenan. I've done 47 of them, right? Go back and watch them. I'm getting to the point where it's not statistically correct, but it's getting pretty damn close. And every single one of them makes the same fucking mistakes all the time. And they're stupid. I'm thinking, if this is how the majority of the world sells, that's why we're behind on quota.
Right. And so who this is always a hard question, but yeah, who's responsible for that? Is it the individual seller or is leadership? Right.
Leadership number one is the individual seller because it's their career.
Right. So we'll get to the seller secondly, but I always think about, if you were a factory manager and you were chartered with, building a product and it worked the same percentage of time coming out of the factory that sellers work, right? That they hit quota. If you can only work 100%, you'd be fired in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So there doesn't seem to be any level of care. And this is obviously, I'm painting with a broad brush, but in general, there's not enough level of care shown by the manager to say, look, I'm equipping these people, I'm helping these people perform the way they're supposed to. And I think there's this general acceptance of bad performance.
I think it's because they don't know the true root cause.
Yeah.
It's them.
It is. And they don't know
It's them. It's them. And because of them, they don't understand where the problem is within their sales organization and what they're doing wrong.
Right.
They don't know what to fix. They want to get more tools.
Yeah, I was speaking in front of a group a couple of years ago, and to this point precisely is I don't know, you guys, if you guys are members of Modern Sales Pros, and not to pick on them, but I took a screen grab of like the 30 most recent threads that have been started, and I said, put it up on the screen for the audience. I said, so here's Modern Sales Pros. What's missing? Go through and read the number of threads or the titles of the threads. And it was to your point precisely, Keenan. It wasn't one thing about actual selling there. There was nothing about a customer there. It was all about tools and process and tech. And it's just like, that's not selling. I don't care what, you can put any label you want on it, but we have this conceit that modern sales is, well, let's take sort of previously unacceptably bad sales behaviors and automate them, and it makes it modern.
Yeah. So let me give you a great example, right? And I'm not going to say the name. It doesn't matter. They don't want to work with me anymore. We're walking away anyways. But I did a discovery, 2 discoveries with a giant, major Fortune 20, 25. They had 7,000 sales reps.
Right.
Okay? I'm talking to the worldwide VP of enablement. And I'm digging in all these questions. I'm doing a typical Keenan discovery. And at one point in time, you could see her getting frustrated. And I asked her, I'm going to butcher this, but I think I said, what is your average sales cycle, or what's your average ASP? One of those, right? And I asked her, and she finally said, why do you want to know? Why are you asking me this question? And I said, well, at the end of the day, as far as we're concerned here at the Sales Guys, there are only 4 critical business problems in a sales organization. That's it. There is missing quota or not reaching your growth goals. There is long sales cycles. There is low average ASP, and there is a low win rate, right? So your win rate's too low. So that's it. I said all roads lead to there. And if you don't have one of those problems, there's really no reason to invest a dime. Okay? So what I try to do is understand where those are. And she said, she stopped me. She goes, let me tell you the problem, and I can save you the hassle. The problem is our buyers are switching, and they used to be in IT. Now they're on the business side and the functional side, and our salespeople don't know how to move from there to there. Does your product or service help? And I said, you know what? I said, I love that. That's what's called the technical problem. So I said, so tell me, because they can't find the buyer on the functional side of the house, what's being affected? Are you missing quota? Are your close rate coming down? Right? Are your average sales price declining? Right? I said it. And she looked at me, she goes, I don't know those answers. I don't know those numbers. So my point in this is supposedly a highly sophisticated organization, a multi-billion dollar company with 7,000 sales reps. She is worldwide VP of enablement. She had no idea.
Right.
And so I literally said to her, I said, so if I can help your people find those people and they still go do a shitty job selling, have we solved anything? And as you can imagine, it wasn't going to be a small gig. So I was like, we're talking a lot of money. And so she got frustrated, and more visibly frustrated, because now her peers are seeing she can't answer these questions. And look, I respect her, and I didn't do anything disrespectful, but you could tell when the call was over, I'm like, yeah, guys, we lost that deal. I just outed her unintentionally, and she wasn't woman enough to say, wow, you got some good points. I have some work to do here. Oh my God, can you help me? It was the other way around. I know what I'm talking about. You don't. She pulled that. I've been in this for 25 years. And I was like, the minute someone pulls that on me, I'm like, well, it was nice talking to you.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, so
You're closed-minded, yes.
Yeah, so to your point, it was my long story.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the fish rots from the head down, right? So, I mean, I understand there's so much more reps could do individually, and more accountability, personal accountability they could take, and responsibility. But too often the reflex action is to point fingers at them rather than helping them.
But don't let reps off the hook, because people kill me.
Not.
People kill you. See, you just poked the bear. I am so frustrated with people. You can't even. And I'm the most people person in the world, right? But I'm so angry and frustrated with people right now because I believe people cheat themselves out of life. They just cheat themselves out of life. My sister's is terminal and she's dying.
I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that.
I'm really struggling with it. And one of the reasons I'm struggling with it is life is precious. Like, I know it feels like it's a long time. When you get to it, it's not that long. And you're going to wake up one day, and what's not here is going to be here, right? Whether it's your kids leaving from home, or whether it's you dying, or your parents dying, or you lose your job. Like, you may be great now, but shit's coming. And if you don't learn to maximize your life, you're fucked. And I literally watch people who send me a note and says, hey, Keenan, I'm struggling in sales, and when's your next $99, training? We only do these once in a blue moon to bring on our certified trainers. And I'm like, hey, I don't know when, but we got a $499 training out here to help you big time. Oh, yeah, I don't have that money. It's like, fuck you. Like, you literally won't spend $500 on your own personal development. It's like, I can't help you. You want everything given to you. You want it wrapped up in a fucking box. You want someone to hand it to you, give you instructions. You don't want to take ownership for your own goddamn life. You want to invest in yourself, and then you get upset and you're mad where you end up. It just pisses me off.
Well, then, I'll give you another similar example, but it's not the trade-off on the money, but it's I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It's, okay, life is full of trade-offs, as you talked about, right? You make choices. And so as a seller, if you're struggling, you have a choice. You could spend 73 hours binging Game of Thrones, or you could spend 1 extra hour a day for 73 straight days devoted to reaching your goal in life. And what would happen if you did that?
Yep.
What would happen?
Whatever you want to happen.
Exactly. I mean, you just gave yourself 73 hours. I'm not opposed to popular entertainment. I like watching stuff as well. But still, everyth's a trade-off.
No one wants to trade. No one wants to trade. Everybody wants to take. No one wants to trade. And then they get mad. I had this dude on Facebook. Guy live in Vail, and this out of fairness, it's a very small. What do you call it? In housing, affordable housing is bad, and it's getting bad because of Airbnb, right?
Right.
And so some guy gets on. He's railing about it. He says, people can't do this and people can't do it. And I simply said, well, why don't you just buy a house? Right? Like, if you don't like it, why don't you buy a house and rent it, or why don't you just buy a house? Well, I can't buy a house and it's fucking this and I'm like, okay, you can't tell you. Why don't you rather than spending your time on here bitching and moaning, lay out what you need to do to buy a house and make it a 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, 9-year plan. Do it. No one bought my houses. Like, it's just, everybody wants to blame everybody fucking else and doesn't stop and say, what choice have I made that got me to a place in life that I can't buy a house? And if you decide to do a career that will never afford you a house, that's okay. Then you must really like that career, accept it, and stop complaining you can't buy a fucking house. It's just amazing the lack of accountability and ownership we have placed. And the reason I get so mad at, as you can tell I'm so fired up, is not because it affects me, but because somewhere in my life I learned that I can get whatever I want out of it, and it hurts me inside.
Right.
To know that somebody is in so much pain that they can't get what they want out of life, that they're blaming others. It shakes me to the core. It's like watching that person walk up and stick their hand in the stove for the 5th time and bleed everywhere and screaming and yelling. It's like, stop! Like, it's just stop, please stop. And they don't.
Yeah.
Kills me.
Side note, people listening, if you want a sort of masterclass in personal accountability, follow Keenan on Facebook. Over the last 4 years, nobody better. Believe me. Yeah.
And I'm a liberal, FYI. I am not the asshole that says pull yourself up by the bootstraps and your personal life didn't have something to do with it. I factor that in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's that most human thing you'll read. I look for it. It's the only thing I read on Facebook, actually. So I know all about your European vacation this past summer and so on. So
thank you, sir.
I fanboy Keenan on Facebook. Yeah, I just agree 100%. I mean, it's. I don't know if it's any different than it's ever been, but I think we have the ability to talk about it more in terms of the accountability, and also there's just more distractions, I think, perhaps than there was in the past. There's so much coming at you, and we just have to make a choice. We can't have it all, and. Yeah, if you sacrifice your learning, you sacrifice your growth so you can watch an extra episode of The Bachelor, then that's a choice you're making. And to your point, that's on you. What do you think, Becc? We sort of been on a rant.
You have.
Yeah, sorry, Beck.
No, you mean on accountability or sales leadership?
Both.
I mean, the accountability piece, I think the thing, respectfully, you two are missing is, the excuses are easier. So I don't think deep down believe the excuse of like that it's someone else's fault. They just need something to say. Like reality is in both sales, life in general, like the day that I became accountable, it completely, and I think there's shades of it, like right. You don't just, it's not digital. You're not just accountable 100% or zero accountability. But right. the day that I flipped to an accountability mindset, I'll never forget it. It's like, it made my life infinitely better and also infinitely more difficult, because you know that if you're not getting this thing, that it's on you. You know that right. When you get in a fight, that there was some piece that you had to do with it. You sure. know that when you got let go, that you had some piece to do. It wasn't all your manager. It wasn't all right. bullshit. It wasn't right. all, someone else is doing. And so I think the accountability piece, like, it's a tough mindset. Now, to Keenan's point, it pays off. Of like, I hear a lot of people, they say, oh, well, I wish I was where you are in your career. Or like, I wish that I had this background, of like, I didn't grow up with that, or I didn't have what you have, the network that you have in the Bay Area. I'm like, let me explain something to you. Yeah. I moved to San Francisco as a 30-year-old and became an SDR at 30 with no network.
Right. And
I knew that being the most expensive city in the world, that I needed to make an imprint. Like, my life is mine at that point. And so I needed to do something, and I needed to do it fast. So the things that I did, it wasn't linear. It wasn't like, and I'm not a marquee example, certainly not in my lifetime, but, overall of like the accountability mindset, there was a lot of times where I just had to flat out get kicked in the teeth. But that piece, when I moved to the Bay Area, I'm like, I've got to find the right people and get in the right, like, I just got to make it happen. I had zero tech knowledge. I had zero network, And so it's like the things that I did was, show up at networking events, research that person before and get in front of them, pray that you say the right thing. When you get kicked down, like, figure out what you did wrong and try to make it better. So I think traversing over to sales leadership, I think part of it is on the leaders. And I think that the marquee of a good sales leader is someone who knows what works. And that's the gap for them, is they don't know tactically and they don't know structurally what works. And the gap for them is actually, to your point, an accountability piece, because it's on you as a leader to do what you have to do to find out what does work and then coach it to all these reps. Like some people say like, oh, okay, how do I motivate my team? Like, what spiffs can I do to motivate my team? I'm like, who doesn't have to, a team that doesn't need to be motivated? A team that's winning. So figure out what helps them win. And when they're winning, you don't have to like do some like team outing with beers and like everyone has a partner where they get to know you better. Like, they're all huddled around home plate watching the guy walk in, who just hit the grand slam. So I think, to your point, I think it is an accountability piece for sales leaders, that they're like, okay, I'm going to hide, but I don't know tactically how to make this cold call better. I don't know tactically what this rep is doing wrong. I don't know tactically what will work, so I'm just going to, I guess, shout a couple things at them, ask them
to do more of it.
More.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Do more of it. Like, I hear the theory, and this is what tells me that we're in a one of the pieces we're in a very dangerous spot is people say like, oh, well, the best sales reps don't always make the best leaders. And I'm like, I agree with you, but they have to be good at sales to be a good leader. Otherwise, what on earth are they leading them to?
Yeah, talking about gaps, I think there's this gap between being a sales leader and just being a sales boss. And we've got a lot of bosses. We don't have enough leaders. And I think that's for the reasons you talked about, Becc, and Keenan, you've talked about, that's the gap. We can close that gap. And also something else you talked about, winning breeds confidence, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have the situation where you have these ridiculous goals that are set that are never going to be achievable. It's just a basic tenet of human psychology that winning breeds confidence. Put your people in a position where they can experience some success and then ratchet it up some, right? But, we have this, as you said, the stats where so few SDRs make their numbers. What are they learning? They're learning defeat.
You say something that's really interesting. Now, I'm just postulating, so you guys, I'm giving you permission to poke the shit out of this, right? And it doesn't speak for those, I would say, who were born in the 80s or below, right? The early 90s are on the cusp, but everybody after, okay? And I get it. Some people are going to get all their panties in a wad, but I believe some of the problems we're having today are a result of our society shifting its parenting style from teaching to protecting. So I grew up in a generation where there wasn't any. Look, we played video games. Trust me, parents, get away from the TV. Get outside. Like, they had the same type of problems, but the difference is they said go out and leave. So when you got out, I can tell you all the fights I got in that my parents never knew I got in. I can tell you about all the times we had to negotiate on where we were going to build the fort. I can tell you how we negotiated where we were going to get the stuff for the fort. Who's going to get what. Like, there was a lot of interaction and stuff that parents were not part of that kids had to figure out on their own. Same thing with sports. Kids weren't put in sport. Like, my kids are on a very detailed sport track now. But when I was younger, you played 3 different sports. When one was over, it was over, it was over. You moved on to the next one, right? The coaches were allowed to yell and scream at you. You had to learn to deal with those types of things. So I think a lot of the leadership qualities that, some people are not born with, they're natural leaders, unnatural leaders, but a lot of the qualities that create the foundation for leadership happened in childhood and as young adults that we have completely buffered kids from in an effort to protect them. Right? So I honestly believe that what you have is a generation of people who are literally learning to be leaders on the fly because they didn't have to actually figure any of this shit out for themselves because their parents did everything. Everything for them.
No, I agree. Someone asked me on a podcast as a guest on a while back, I thought the root cause of bad sales leadership. And I said, bad parenting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's basic. Like, when my kids started skiing, I made them carry their own skis. I literally have pictures of my 2-year-old Ava carrying her own skis. Now, look, she'd get tired, so I'd stop, carry a little, but all forever. And I got in a fight with a buddy, it doesn't really matter. And he thought he was being funny and ripping on me because a bunch of parents that I didn't know kept calling me the asshole dad. I was that dick dad that's yelling at his kids and making them carry their skis and making them walk to the bus. And I was like, damn, fucking badge, wear it, right? Because I got a 16-year-old daughter who is not dating yet. Beautiful girl, by the way, has no interest, just starting, little interest in boys, but not dating. Why? No insecurities about who she is. No, not looking for attention, because plenty from her dad. Is comfortable who she is because she's accomplished so many things by the time she was 16. So now, badge. Like, parents are just afraid for their kids to be uncomfortable, and I do just the opposite. If my kid's not uncomfortable, I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, I don't know, Becc, if you're holding back or not, but I don't want to jump over you.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think another thing that's different is, we were, in my generation, we were trained at an early age by my parents to go meet adults and to interact with adults. And at one point in time, I thought, well, they're just sort of showing us off, right? But that wasn't it. What they were doing is they were teaching us to deal with adults on sort of a peer level, right? We'd be respectful, Mr. and Mrs. and so on and so forth, but we'd have learned how to have conversations with people that were different statuses. And that was deliberate on their part. And I saw it with all my, a good chunk of my friends, the same thing. And I don't think we see as much of that these days either.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that you bring up being protected, because I hear over and over and over and over and over again from SDR leaders in specific, they're like, well, I want to protect my team. I want to shield my team. I want to take care of them. I'm like, protect them from what? Quota attainment? Like, that's what you're protecting them from.
Right.
I'm like, I was brutal on my reps. And I thankfully, I did not have a churn. And if I had to guess why, it's because I'm like, look, we're going to come into a one-on-one and you're going to prep for 30 minutes and I'm going to prep for 30 minutes and we're both going to invest in this thing and we're going to find the freaking problem and we're going to make it better. It's going to hurt. It's not going to be very much fun. Like, I was running reports on, like, if you're ghost styling on me, and then I would like look through like at the beginning of every day, okay, pull up the last 50 emails that they sent. Why the hell did you do this thing whenever we just talked about not doing this thing? And people, I would get the reputation of like, oh, well, she's savage. And I'm like, I'm savage for them. I'm for them. I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, well, the activity metric, I hear this sometimes of like, oh, the activity metric, like, maybe we can get it up to 25 dials. I'm like, 25 dials? I'm like, I could do that in an hour. Like, what are they doing with the rest of their day? And so if you're enabling them to have those behaviors, then like you're disabling them from being successful. You're not only telling them that it's okay, you're discouraging them, from finding the thing that works. Like when I first started deploying personalization at scale, when I first started digging into that world, the reason was, it wasn't because I've heard way too many times, and it makes my stomach churn every single time, there's no original content. And I'm like, there should be. Because we have new problems every single day, and we have to solve some more stuff. And so I'm sitting in my chair, and I had been trained by all the classic names. And I'm like, and somehow, and I had studied them, and I'm like, and somehow I still don't have a cold call track that works and emails that work. So I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull in all of those methodologies. They're going to be out 30% of this. And then we're going to have to do some stuff, and we're going to have to alpha test our butts off, but we're going to have to do some stuff that hasn't been done before. So I'm like, what if we made it 1-to-1? What about them? And I'm like, okay, what are all the buckets that we could do that on? And then what are, all the self-engaged content, self-authored content, self-identified traits? We started building it out, and it wasn't out of fun. It was out of necessity of like, we're practitioners who need to get better. We need to drive more numbers. And so to the point of, I think the entire conversation on accountability, I realized, I'm like, look, I can either go back to my leadership, and say like, hey, we didn't, come in that hot in terms of numbers, or I can freaking do something about it. And like, I'm going to do what I got to do kind of thing. So point being, I'm like, I hear that flavor in sales too much of like, oh, be super, super empathetic, or be super sympathetic, or like, care about their holistic being, or, like, okay, we need to, talk about the whole person and bring our whole person to, to work and take a ton of PTO and like, take care, like, and I'm like, and I get it. I totally get it. But at the end of the day, like, I want to live my life knowing that when I come, and like whatever, 85, 86, 87, if I didn't get what I wanted out of life, it's on me. So like, it's on me.
Yep. Yeah. It's on me.
If I didn't hit that quota, it's on me. If I didn't, hit that number, it's like, I don't know, man, stay at the office for later. Like, make more dials, make higher quality dials, do more research, find out something about the person, like do something. Do something about it.
I have this new spread. I posted about this the other day, and it got a couple people's attention. I have this spread, and I do it to my daughters as well. But what I say is this: if you're trying to get something done, okay, and I don't care what it is, if it's you got to freaking cut down a certain amount of trees at a certain amount of time, if you got to close so many deals by a certain amount of time, you got to be married by a certain amount of time. I don't care what it is. You've got a goal that you've got to achieve. And if you don't achieve that goal, you and or someone you love immensely dies. Now, you cannot cheat, lie, or steal. You can't do anything illegal, right? What do you do different than you're doing today? And that spread is massive. When you start asking people, it's like, yo, man, you got 1 week to get 3 meetings, right? And right now, you're not getting no meetings a week. And if you don't get those, your wife is going to die. What are you going to do different? It's amazing how their head starts spinning. It's amazing the creativity they come up with. It's amazing the things they start realizing they're not doing that they fucking get done all of a sudden. And so that spread, but where you're operating today versus where you'd operate if you die or someone you love die, that tells you what you've got left to give. Now, I don't expect anybody to play at that level. It's unsustainable. But you better be a lot fucking closer to that than you are today. And that tells me how much you're leaving on the table.
I used to say the same thing to the positive. I used to say, if I were to give you $1 million to my reps, if I were to give you $1 million,
carrot sticks,
by the end of the day, how would you do it? And they're like, okay, I would. And I'm like, then do that.
Yes, then do that. Thank you. Thank you. Then do that.
that. Like, however your brain starts thinking, like, execute on that and take the onus. And again, it's exhausting. But what's more exhausting of like hard things, easy life. Easy things, hard life. So like, I don't want to be that 80-year-old that's like, you know,
living with regrets.
Oh, well, I didn't get what I wanted and it's someone else's fault. So I'm like, sales, the reason I love it is it's execution heavy. It's not this good juju of, oh, well, I made someone feel this way, Dad. It's like, no, did you close? Did you close the freaking deal?
At the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
So it's like, you know, figure it out. Figure it out in the conversation of what you need to say, what you need to ask, the information you need to be after. How do you help someone? You know, of like, I see a big train of like, oh, okay, well, I need to send them a muffin basket. And I'm like, so I view Keenan's work. Sometimes they're like, oh, well, he's the guy that yells at people and he's super mean. Keenan, I don't know if you know the people.
He's a teddy bear. He just
they're
has
like, you know,
strong opinions, which is good.
They're like, oh, well, he's super, you know, mean or scary or whatever. And I'm like, you know what's more scary? Not hitting quota. And you know what's even scarier? A trainer who doesn't care about you not hitting quota. So like, he's going to yell at you.
What I say to people in my training? I say, listen, if I'm yelling at you, that's a good sign. It means I care and I think I can get to you. If you see me say, all right, you're right, and I move on, I've given up on you. If I'm not talking, I've given up. Fuck it. I'm not going to waste my energy if you're not. So if I'm not talking to you, calling you, argue, if you say something stupid, I don't argue with you, you know, you're out. Like I don't care. Don't care anymore.
All right. You too. So here's a sample for everybody listening of what you're going to get when you attend one of the events on what's the name of the tour? Is it the Flip the Script tour?
Flip the Script North American tour.
Flip the Script North American tour.
What I'm speaking on, or I think I'm speaking on.
So give people some information about where they can register.
So if you go to I'll send you the link, but I think it's...
Well, we'll put it in the show notes for sure. But yeah, just people want to do it right now.
Go to flipthescript.co/tour-2021. Everything's in there. But the 3 assets, and I haven't announced this yet or what I'm speaking on, but I want to announce it now. So the thing that I'm going to be talking on is the 2 different patterns that you need to interrupt within selling and how to interrupt them.
Excellent.
And the 3 assets that people are going to get are they're going to get an entire encyclopedia of every single play under the sun that you can run from a pipeline perspective, an entire cold call infrastructure, and then an entire guide on how to intertwine trigger-based relevance, static core relevance into a playbook if you believe in personalization or you don't believe in personalization. You're like, I just want to do templates only.
Good stuff.
I'm very pumped, and I'm pumped to hear what Keenan has, because he's going to custom craft for each city.
Well, he's gonna bring the energy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about either. All right. As always, a pleasure talking with both of you, and look forward to hearing great things about the tour.
What city do you live in, Andy?
San Diego.
Come on up to LA, baby.
I mean, we could.
Come on up to
it's
LA.
a free ticket. Troubadour.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, there we go.
You can even go to the Troubadour and see the iconic theater.
Only if I can sing karaoke in front of the crowd.
I will let that happen. I will gladly give up my spot. Done. Like, I'll step aside and just sit down.
I was kidding on that one. No one wants to hear me sing. Believe me.
Yeah, sure. I do. I personally do.
No, you don't. Yeah. You're a glutton for punishment. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, baby.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guests, Becc Holland and Keenan, for sharing their insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help with that. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.